The gap between two worlds represents this. There's the old world and there's the new world. Okay, so here's where you are or where you were, and here's where you're going. In between that is the gap. And the gap is the transition. And that's what people need to be conscious of right now, is that they are in the gap. Whatever they're doing, things have changed and they're in transition. And the problem is, especially with this type of pandemic that has no history behind it, it's new to all of us. We're trying to sort out, okay, exactly what's that new world going to look like. And so what I like to say to also express that metaphor is that the gap is what we call the in-between place. And I encourage listeners, and anybody I talk to about change and transition, is to first and foremost recognize that you're in the in-between place and not to get stuck there.
What's up, friends? Thanks for stopping by the show. I'm the host, Sean Dustin. If this is your first time listening, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. It's good to have you with us. If you are enjoying what I'm doing and want to support it, you can subscribe, rate, and review on your favorite podcast platform. You can also find direct links to the show, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube. You can find those at the bottom of the show notes in my Linktree link, as well as episodes from shows that I've been on as a guest. This show is also available on YouTube in video form. So these conversations, you can catch those on video over at on the YouTube channel. Nowhere to go but up. Also, check out the a new true crime documentary series that's coming out in virtual cinemas August 7th. You can catch a free preview of the first episode, or actually you can catch the whole first episode on August 5th. Check out the Con Facebook page or the Real Progressives Facebook page, and it should be playing on those platforms. There will also be a bunch of links that you can follow to any of the stuff, the pre-interviews and stuff like that I've compiled in the show notes. Today I am talking with Kevin McNulty, and Kevin is a retired Air Force veteran, spent I think over 20 years in the Air Force. Also, he's an author, coach, just a really cool dude, actually. And we had a great conversation, talked about a lot of different things, from religion to spirituality, the difference between, from both of our perspectives. Also, just, it was just a really good conversation. It's a couple hours, almost 2 hours, I think. And yeah, check it out. I enjoyed it. So without further ado, let's get to the show. This is the Nowhere to Go But Up podcast, and I'm your host, Sean Dustin. Today, we are talking to Kevin McNulty, who is an international speaker, author, and coach based in Nashville, Tennessee. He's got over 30 years study work in personal and professional growth in human dynamics in the human dynamics arena. God, I hate cold reading. He's also a 20-year. He was in the United States Air Force for 20 years. Had a long career there. I imagine he retired from that. He now owns his own consulting firm, Huma-dyne Life Skills Institute, that offers soft skills and workplace dynamics consulting and training. Kevin is also the author of The Gap Between Two Worlds, a book on personal change, transition, and growth. He is also the host of Get the Edge podcast. Kevin, good morning.
Sean, what a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
No, thanks for taking the time to come and talk.
Love it. Love it. I've had a chance to listen to a couple of your podcasts, and I just love the way you stream.
Yeah, thank you. I'm new for sure. I'm new in it, and I'm trying to find my place here in this medium. There's a lot of things that I don't know about.
I hear you.
How to get an audience and grow an audience and all these other things. But by talking to all of the people that I am talking to, I'm getting bits and pieces of information, and some of these coaches are actually, offering, hey, discounts on their stuff, free things for my listeners. So, I mean, it's a marathon.
When where you and I met on one of the podcast sites, Facebook pages, I have to tell you, I belong to a bunch of different ones, speaker pages, all these sorts of things. I can't find too many that are as engaging and helpful as the podcast groups, and it's a great place. I get a lot of good information. I've been podcasting a little while, but still it's not my main thing. So I have, a lot to learn too. And then I just pick up so much, man. Podcast groups are a great group of people.
Well, I think it's because everybody realizes it's not really a feast or famine mentality there.
Good point.
People realize that even though there's, a million podcasts on Apple or iTunes, only 300,000 of them are actually active. You know what I mean? And consistently putting out content. People, I hate to say it, but are like fly by night, flash in the pan. It's a great idea. It's fun. I get it. But there's more to it than that. There's so much more to it than that. I mean,
then you got,
Yeah, go ahead. What were you saying?
No, I was going to say, then you do the editing and you realize, okay, this is a little bit of work.
Yeah, I mean, I went hog wild on that, and I going down holes of and trying to remove every single to make myself, sound like I'm not an idiot,
Right.
And you know who I have to thank for that is the first interview that I ever did. It was somebody who did that, and I listened to that interview, and I'm like, oh my God, I sound so intelligent. And I just got rid of all of my dumb verbiage that's unneeded. Yeah. And so I started doing it, and then I was like, you know what? Screw this. I'm just going to let it out how it goes. I mean, if you want to listen to me, then listen to me. If you want to listen to my guest, listen.
I think that's a good point. I've studied some of these things, and there are some podcasters also out there that have all the best equipment. They do all the great editing, all the post-production. They do really all of the technical things. But when it comes down to it, they don't deliver the conversation, you see. And I have noticed there are many out there. I mean, you can look at Gary Vee and a whole host of others who they just let it roll. They're not caught up in the things that maybe many would consider unprofessional, if you will, or not, or not seasoned. So I'm with you there. I really am.
Well, it feels like a lot of these shows are like trying to get like radio broadcast quality or bring that radio broadcast mentality to the podcasting space. And it's like, that's really not what this is. I mean, you can do that, but I think what really resonates with people is the authenticity and the fact that, like, look, if I throw this on YouTube, what are you looking at? You're looking at, I'm getting to know a little bit about you just by seeing what what's behind you. It feels like you're in an actual conversation with a normal person. It doesn't feel like it's an idealic individual that you're listening to who's polished and
correct
and all nice and pretty and clean.
Yes, you will not get that with me.
Me neither.
Polished and clean.
I think there's a lot to be said for gruff and just kind of like, hey, more people can identify with me than somebody else who's polished and all pretty and stuff.
Yeah. No, that's good, man.
So one of the things that I'm really trying to do is not talk so much when I have a guest.
It's hard to do.
Yeah. Well, yesterday I was interviewing somebody and we ended up getting on to the subject of, it's more like it was him, an author, interviewing me. You know, he was a psychologist and an organizational psychologist. And I heard something, I'd mentioned something about meth and my background. And I guess he has a family member struggling with that. And so it turned into me talking about my whole thing, because he's trying to understand what that is in his life, with his family member. And so I was like, all right, well, let me try and steer away from that, because, it really is about, I want to know about you and why you're here talking to me and what you're about. And I mean, 20 years a veteran, we had a pretty lengthy conversation the other day about some stuff. I mean, I feel like I've gotten to know you a little bit. 20 years in the Air Force. That's
Yeah, I like to say that it's essentially where I cut my teeth. And I'll back up just a second to suggest this, and I don't recall if I told you this at the time, but the way that I describe my life is I spent my first almost 40 years of life in the military, actually, because I grew up as a military brat. And for those who have not been a brat, it's really difficult for folks to understand. But there's a couple of things. First of all, my dad was a Green Beret. He was a Special Forces guy. He was 26 years in. I mean, just hardcore. And so as a dad, which he's 84 now, have a terrific relationship, but he was all soldier, and he was all soldier to us. And so we literally were up at 5 a.m, had to make our beds like a soldier. I know we stood at attention when we talked to him, all these other sorts of things. And so I spent 18 years doing that. Took a year and a half after I graduated from high school to philander, I guess you could say. I mean, I just broke loose like there was no tomorrow. I was an aspiring musician and singer and songwriter, and so I thought that I could make it in that world. So anyways, I broke away from living with him, and then found myself homeless for a couple of months, and decided I probably need to go into the military. Well, because of the, sort of being raised by him in the Army. Of course, I'm a teenager at the time. I'm 19 years old. I wanted to rebel any way that I could. So I decided, I'm not going to join the Army. I'm going to join the Air Force just to piss him off. And I did join the Air Force. And frankly, it was the best thing that I could have done was join the military. I was a thinker. I was a philosopher, whatever you can be at 19. I was a musician. I had no real direction. And the military immediately, and I fit in very well, remembering that I grew up as a military brat. We moved around every 2 or 3 years. Think about that, all around the world. So this was not something that was unique to me. I joined the military and it felt relatively comfortable, but what it really did is gave me the structure that I needed as a teenager, quite honestly. And it was the best thing I ever did. I ended up spending 20 years in it, mostly because every time it came around to new re-enlisting, I couldn't decide if I wanted to stay in or if I got out, what was I going to do? Just turned out to be the greatest blessing. So I retired in 2000. And, without getting too complicated about it, when I was in the military, the vast majority of that I spent in what we call the human relations education field. So I advised commanders on people problems, essentially, a whole host of them, from race relations to everything that you can believe. We'd go in and do these huge, we call them climate assessments that you all in the private sector call them employee engagement surveys, and did just a lot of work in that arena. And then I got heavily involved in the last few years of the Air Force with the Covey Leadership Center, Franklin Covey, Stephen Covey, and we were integrating the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Principle-Centered Leadership into the Air Force. And so because of the work that I did, I was lucky enough to get on board with that and became one of the people that started integrating that work. And so I started, teaching and presenting and coaching on as you well know, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People is all about personal development, and then principle-centered leadership and what matters most, all of that. And so by the time I get out at 20 years, I was highly skilled in the arena of workplace dynamics and personal development, not to mention that probably in the early to mid 80s, like many, perhaps even you, I got latched on to Tony Robbins and Wayne Dyer and Stephen Covey and just immersed myself into personal development. So again, by the time I got out in 2000, I really had 15, 20 years of a body of study and work. At this point, I had been already doing a lot of training in human relations. And I think, Sean, because of my creative skills, I started developing my own models. So in other words, if I were trying to describe how your mindset affects the way that you behave, and therefore the results you get flow out of what you do. So in other words, what you think flows into what you do, and what you do flows into what the results you get in life. You know, I built models around those things, and visual models, kind of training models, and it became a bit of a signature. So I have a variety of these kinds of models, mostly of them just simple to explain concepts and abstract ideas dealing with personal development and so forth and on and on. So yeah, that's it. I mean, in a nutshell, that's how I got to the place that I am now. Started this in 2000, my company Huma-dyne, which stands for human dynamics. I really wanted human dynamics, but I couldn't think of anything. And I had my first client. I was like, crap, I need a name of a company or something, so I just kind of threw that together and have been zooming since. I've been doing this now 20 years and just really blessed, honestly, that I've been able to develop a career and literally work for myself. I've had employees, and and I smile because after I said employees, because I think to myself, even though I deal with a lot of employee problems and workplace dynamic problems, man, there's nothing like just working for yourself. And that's all you're accountable to, except your clients, of course.
Yeah, I'd love to know what that feels like. I've been working blue collar construction for a long time. By the way, thank you for your service.
Thank you, man. Appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, personal development is, I remember Tony Robbins. I remember when he first came out, and I remember the infomercials at the, late night.
Exactly.
And, just this tall, big ass dude just running up and down the aisles, trying to get everybody jazzed and jacked up and motivated for life. And let's get ready to change, and let's do this, And I never got into him.
Oh, you didn't really?
No, I never got into any of those early pioneers of the personal development, self-improvement space. My influences are Joe Rogan, Andy Frisella, more of my, Yes. So I was listening to Rogan for, been listening to him for a couple of years, but it really, we have similar backgrounds. Obviously I'm not into jujitsu. He didn't go to prison. But just some of the, how we were raised and stuff that he talks about, I identify with him quite a bit. And, sometimes it's crazy. It's crazy how people influence you. Yeah. Cause you don't necessarily know who it is it's going to be that's going to imprint on you.
Very well said.
And so one of the craziest things that I noticed, and it happened to me, is there was a guy that I was working with when I was an apprentice, building a hospital, and I was doing fire stop, which is that stuff they put around all of the penetrations that go through the walls, that red stuff. Mm-hmm. And so I was doing that, and there's another part of our industry too, which is insulation, which I do now, and that's and he was telling me, he's like, hey man, you're pretty smart. You're rolling around with these prints that a lot of guys can't even read those, and you seem to be doing very well. He's like, you should get out of this and try to get in as an insulator, because it's more money for one, and there's more longevity. Who knows how long what you're doing right here is going to last. And it's those that actually got me to thinking, because I never really thought about it. I was just doing a job, and I was like, all right, well, yeah, maybe I should. And I did, and I got in and was able to have a pretty good career.
I love that.
In doing that. But now I do that for other people, because you never know when you spot talent in somebody, or you spot something that that sets somebody else apart from other people, and they may not know that about themselves, and so it took that person to wake up in me something I didn't even know I had. And now I just try to pay that. Yeah, I just try to pay that forward now. And anytime I see somebody who I spot talent, I try to hook them up. Even there was a guy that I was one of our apprentices. I had him on. I knew we were talking, and he wanted to start doing podcasts and stuff like that. And he didn't know that I did it. Mm-hmm. And he just overheard me in a conversation about mine. And I had him on, I said, hey, come over to my place. I'll do an interview with you. That way you can see what it's like, and you can decide for yourself if this is something you want to do.
Wow. And you just hit on two really important topics there that really resonate with me. I think I had mentioned to you that I have just recently launched a new program called Get the Edge, and it's life skills for teenagers. I won't go into that, but to say that those two things that you just mentioned are two of the things that are actually involved in the modules and some of the things that I've decided to start teaching teenagers, mostly juniors and seniors, getting ready to make that big transition from high school to college or work or whatever the case might be. Number one is what you just said about, influencing, that you just never know who's going to sort of put a stamp on you, or who's going to seep into your mind and influence who you are or where you choose to go in your life. And in fact, the module that I'm kind of talking about there, it is in part the concept of, going out and finding mentors. So, and at the bottom line for teenagers, and it's not just teenagers, it's everything. I mean, the things that I'm teaching the teenagers are exactly not exactly, but for the most part, what I teach in corporate America and with my coaching clients. And that is this idea that you will be influenced. There's no if, and, or buts about it. The key is that, of course, younger people are much more influential, as we all know. So what I'm encouraging, young people to understand is that, and this is like not groundbreaking news, but who you hang around with, who you not just hang around with, but who you bring into your orbit will have an incredible amount to do with where you go in your life, how you think, what you believe, all these other sorts of things. And so that's incredibly important for really everybody to know. It still exists, but of course, as for everybody, but of course, it's more important for younger people. And then the second thing was what you had just said as a mentor. And that is, to your point, that we all have what we all know is called blind spots. And people think of blind spots as something that like you got spinach on your teeth and you don't realize and everybody's laughing at you. Okay, that's a blind spot. But there are other blind spots that are, for instance, fundamentally, many, should say, young people and grown professionals do not know their own potential. And there's a whole host of reasons why that is. But one of the reasons why we don't know our own potential is because while there are other people that may see it or maybe not, but even especially those who see it but never say anything to us, I don't want to put this in the wrong vein, but you kind of rob the other person of having the knowledge of what you see, having the perspective that you see. And you brought that out perfectly, that when you spot somebody with talent, you say it. And I do in earnestly, I do this all the time, even with the younger coaching. I coach a fair amount of young professionals too. And I'm always saying something about, listen, I don't know if you know this, but you really have a great way of processing information and getting it whittled down to a solid idea. And you need to remember that as a professional. And to your point, people, especially younger people, but I would say everybody, they kind of chime up and go, really? And you're like, yeah. So it's the concept that I used to tell my daughters this all the time, that if you're in the picture, you can't see the full picture. You have to step outside of the picture. Well, how do you do that? A whole host of ways. One is by asking questions of yourself. But the second way is what you just said, is getting feedback from other people, getting input from other people. So now reverse it back to the role that you're talking about. I think that every day, folks like you and me, whether you're a podcaster, a construction worker, a speaker, whatever it is, we have the opportunity, particularly, I'm going to say this, Sean, to younger people, to be able to help them along and inspire them to do, inspire them, or at least influence from the standpoint that you are going to see people and you spot the talent and you say something to them. Let them in on that little secret. I think it's a great point that you're bringing up there.
Thanks. Another, as you were talking about that, and something came into my mind, is that we also, being in a capitalist system and society, it doesn't lend to cooperation. Okay, for the most part, it's competition.
Yeah, I'm tracking with you. Yeah,
it's competition, not cooperation.
I see what you're saying. Yeah,
and then so when you're always in a competitive mode, you see your fellow man as a competitor, or
fair
somebody
enough.
who may be vying for your spot, or you know what I mean. And what I see in my industry a lot is that the older guys don't teach the apprentices the skills to be faster, more efficient, to keep themselves working once they turn out and become expensive.
Nice.
Hourly. Okay. So but that's all because it's feast or famine. They don't want it. They are afraid that this guy's going to come back and take my job.
Yes. Very good point. Yes, absolutely.
And so if we can get away from that, and I believe that when you spot that in other people and you treat everybody as colleagues or
peers or whatever, yeah,
peers, colleagues, you're not my competitor, you're my whatever word you want to put in there other than competitor.
You're my friend, my brother, my collaborator, I get where you're going with it, absolutely agree.
I if we can come at it from a perspective of you have something to offer me, I have something to offer you, let's have an exchange and see if there's anything there. Let me, and don't look at me as a competitor, just look at me as somebody. If I have some knowledge that will help you to not have to, with the podcaster, my friend that wanted to do the podcast, it was my whole goal of him was to here are the steps, all right, that I took. You don't have to take them, but if you want to, it'll eliminate a whole lot of this other stuff that you will have to inevitably figure out. Not that that's bad, that is a good thing when you figure out something for your own, then you're able to build your own system around it, you know what I mean, of things that are easier for you. But I mean, if I can help eliminate some of those steps and give you, some of my best practices or what I found that are easy for me, And
100%, and you're talking about the notion of people that, some of us have what we call the abundance mentality and others have what's known as the scarcity mentality. People with the abundance mentality who you're describing and to which I 100% agree with and think you said it perfectly, they believe that the pie is big enough, that there's enough pie there for everybody. And they're not in fear of, and there's other sort of motives or mindsets that people have. Like, I don't know, I probably come from a simpler place. I don't know if I even think about the pie as much as I do, perhaps as I think you're describing, is that I just like helping people. I like seeing other people succeed. I won't say that I don't ever. If there's a strict competitor out there, I'll compete if I need to for a gig or whatever the case might be. But that's not what you're talking about. But it's the notion that, that the pie's big enough and that we want everybody to succeed. And so we don't need to approach this, as you just said, from a win-lose perspective. It can be win-win. As a matter of fact, there's a lot to be argued about. A lot that you can argue that cooperation and collaboration, the win-win mentality, that you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, all of those idioms, if you will, is the way to go. I'll tell you, it does come down to your mindset. I am a capitalist. I want to make money. I work hard. I try to compete, but it's not to the exclusion of peace and harmony and helping other people and giving. Those two things are not separate in my mind. I want to help other people. I care about other people. I believe in being a good citizen. So, you don't have to have even some great big philosophy behind that other than, I like to make money, but I like to help other people too. And I think it's very important. I think it's incredibly important. And by the way, haven't we been seeing a little bit more of that with this whole pandemic, where people are tending to be a little bit more giving?
Well, yeah, and that's going to lead me into my next. What I was going to say is that yes, I mean, I don't have anything against living in a capitalist system. All right, there's good points to it. There's good points to there's always something that's good in socialism. There's something that's that works. There's something that works in communism. There's something that works in every one of these things. There's good things about it. The problem is that we, instead of just taking everything that's good from the things that have been tried and blending it in and trying to work with that, that's a whole nother story. But
yeah, well, and I will say real quick that one of the important things that I would bring out there to your point is that when you use words like capitalism, socialism, communism, they have very strict connotations. And so, I might say, I'm a capitalist, and people are like, oh, he's a capitalist pig. He means no. And socialism doesn't necessarily mean giving out everything to everybody and everything's completely equal all the time. So to your point, I think, especially when getting these kind of conversations, you kind of have to define a few things about, whatever capitalism is. So I mean, I hear what you're saying, but people can't get confused by those terminologies.
Yeah, no, I get it. They're trigger words.
Yeah, they're trigger words. Yeah.
So let's put it in a different perspective. So we're all in a data-driven society right now, right? Everything is about data. Everything is about, what this is, compile it. Let's figure it out. Let's let the numbers talk. And no different. There's data sets in every one of these societies, right? Or systems.
Yeah.
And so I think that, it wouldn't be a bad idea to take a look at the data on all of them, see what works, what didn't work. And, we're at a point right now where there's going to be some major changes. Okay.
No doubt.
We're starting to see, not that it wasn't visible before, but people weren't awake to it before. All right. Of the system, how it's, kind of, it is unfair. It is an unfair situation that we find ourselves in. I'm lucky. I have a decent job. I'm not hurting for anything. I don't feel like there's inequality in my wages.
Yeah.
But when you really start looking at everything that's happening and our elections, that process, the government, I mean, we're in an old system, right? That is not designed to our technology and everything that we're doing is crashing and it's not it's like when you try to put a battery together and it or a magnet and it keeps trying to separate itself.
Well, there's a book I read several years ago. I'm trying to remember. Deutschman is his last name. I just can't think of his first name. but it was about change. And he basically, well, the title was Change or Die. And he basically made that argument. And I think there is a huge silver lining with what's going on right now, Sean. It can't be, I don't think, I mean, there are plenty. I'm certainly not the only privileged one to have this thought, but there's many who would probably say this and think this, that there's a silver lining to this huge pandemic, and that is that we were almost, I don't want to say this wrong, I'm just going to say it, but there's almost a silver lining or a blessing that this virus wasn't worse than it was. Imagine it being, let's say, at the level of an Ebola, and having and being as contagious it is in the way that it is. So my point is that while, I don't need to say that anybody who lost a life or who is, damaged through this thing, I don't need to say that it's a sad situation. What I am trying to express here, though, is that this thing is big enough and it's bad enough to help us as individuals, as communities, and as a society to look at ourselves again and to say, okay, this was bad. It could have been a lot worse. What are we going to do to not just protect ourselves from viruses and those sorts of things, but, for instance, I'll just say me, I speak for a living. I do quite a bit of travel. They're not having any meetings or conferences or anything like that anywhere. I am fortunate that I do a fair amount of coaching, so I can still do what we're doing here. This is exactly how I coach.
Yeah.
Having said that, there's no question that I'm reevaluating my own life, my work, how I'm doing things, and do I need to be better prepared for situations? So my point is that, which is what kind of change or die is all about, that I believe everybody, including communities and society, governors and businesses, if you want to talk about doing something in vain, this pandemic would certainly be in vain if people don't stop and step back and take another look and say, okay, how do we need to do this differently? What do we need to do to improve? What do we need to do to change? How do we survive something that might have been worse than this? I mean, one of the big keys here about the pandemic is what it did to again, beyond the obvious grief and the death of lives and those sorts of, so beyond that is what it's doing to the economy. An economy, and I'm not an economist, so I don't even try to pretend to be, but I at least know enough that you go too far and it collapses and it's almost impossible to get out of, you see, or takes years upon years and decades to rebuild itself. So the point is that a lot of different things can cause that, though. Think about 9/11. 9/11 shut down the economy in a lot of ways, shut down the airline business. So my only point is, I'm not trying to get too deep into this stuff. Just my only point is that I encourage everybody, to take a look at their lives, how they do things, their business, their work, and all those things, and make sure that they use this very, very difficult time to make good changes in their life and at least reevaluate, say, okay, what do I need to do differently? Who do I need to take care of? Who do I need to help? Who can help me? I mean, all sorts of questions can come out of that.
Yeah, for sure. And where I was going to go before I went off into that land is to your point, where people are stepping up right now.
Yes.
A lot of the coaches that I know that I've been interviewing, that I have interviewed, they're offering free stuff right now, like just like this.
Yes.
Not one-on-one, but if you want to, like, I know one who's a yoga instructor. She's does all these other things, and she hosts a free check-in, and where we the breathing exercises and that type of stuff, and then yoga.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, yoga. You can join her to do yoga. And another guy, he's doing other stuff. So, and that's great, because on the back end of that, that's going to be more helpful for you and when we come out of this, because people will see that it wasn't about the money for you. It was about
That's right.
what I mean, and you're going to gain a client more than likely. And if you don't, then you don't. But I mean,
no, you don't. it doesn't have to be your motive, but it is a fairly natural consequence that comes out of giving, is that people tend to trust you more, they appreciate you more, and they tend to want to reciprocate. So I agree with you 100%. I sent out messages to a lot of people, including friends on Facebook, all sorts of people saying, listen, I'm a coach, I'm a change and transition coach. I have done this work for 30 years. If I can help you, you know how to get a hold of me. And it's just a pleasure to do that. And guess what? People have reached out to me as well. It's a beautiful thing, man. It really is.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason why I just, normally I wouldn't throw up a scheduling thing on there and just let people, boom, boom, and line them up like that. Like I've got, yesterday I did 7. Today I'm doing 6. I got 7 scheduled for the 23rd and a couple for the 24th. So within a 2-week time frame, I'll you've done like 20 or 25 different interviews. And that's so people can get their message and their, if you've got a book or something that can help that's in the personal development space, because that's where we're all at right now.
Man, absolutely.
Hopefully you're doing what you said. You're taking time and you're using it wisely to get things done that you've been putting off, to not only, around your house, but things that you've been putting off with yourself. And
that's a good point.
Because we can find all kinds of different ways to avoid ourselves and get involved in home projects, but the best way to the best project that you can take care of for your home is yourself.
Well, and this, I've lived in a lot of different places, and one of the things that is clear to me about the American society is that we are moving at, and it depends, faster in some places than others. It's faster for instance, in California than it is, say, here in Tennessee. I mean, just different paces of living. More people create more energy, more pace, and all that sort of thing. But I would also say, though, as a whole, generally speaking, that the American society, the American people, we move way too fast. And well, maybe even not too fast. Fast is not the point, is that we are constantly on the move. That's really the point that I'm trying to make. Not so much the speed, but the regularity of it is that we are always, even as parents, and I have to admit that my wife and I, we kind of fell into this trap too, that we raised 2 girls. One graduated last year from college, the other one's about to graduate this year. But when they were in high school, man, we kind of involved them in everything. If there's something to do, let's go do it. I'm overstating that because we were conscious of it. But that is a real tendency on the part of a lot of parents. But beyond that, as people, we work, we come home, we do this, we do that, we do this on the weekend. It's like you're constantly on the move. And I don't want to say that in and of itself is bad, but the problem is that, and now, of course, with social media and, a gazillion cable channels, what's happening is that our stimulation factor, our mind is in constant stimulation mode. And so that's why you hear people, and I've been guilty of this as well, that go on vacation and spend most of their vacation working. So they don't consider, and I'm not here to judge. I mean, y'all you do what you want. I mean, but there's many people that go on a legit vacation down to Fort Lauderdale and they sit on the beach with their laptop and do work. And again, I'm not here to tell anybody what they ought to do. But my point is that is the new way of doing things. And there are other people, as you well know, again, I know I've fallen into this category. I'm a little bit less that way now, but that I'll go on vacation or I might go somewhere, well, let's say vacation. It takes me at least a day, probably 2 days to settle down and say, okay, Kevin, come on, dude, chill. You don't need to think about anything. Don't be worried. You don't need your laptop. Don't need to get on your phone. Just relax, step back, love your wife, love your kids, pray, meditate, whatever it is, but chill. And it's not what we do anymore in this society. You go over, I lived many years in Germany. You go over to Germany, it's not that way. It really isn't. Most of the particularly Central European countries, they man, when they go on vacation for like 30 days. And I mean, they're gone. They don't. And when they're off, I'm not to say that they're not doing stuff or busy, but it's not the same way. You can go out to, say, around some kind of a park somewhere or a forest area. And man, people just strolling. I mean, I am talking strolling, not running, not jogging, not biking, but just got their hands behind their back and just strolling, looking up, looking around. And that's not like the exception. That's the way that it is. So again, I'm not so much trying to make that comparison, but to say that yeah, I guess I'm trying to say we need to slow down a little bit. But here's the point I was trying to make, is that this pandemic, I think, has caused people to step back a little bit. You got more time, to reflect and to say, okay, what is important in life? Is it all that work I'm doing?
Yeah. Well, and also too, I mean, you're if you're in a bad marriage, you're either going to figure out whether, this is going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back. Either we're going to, get through this, or, when we're done with this, it's done.
It's done. Or maybe we can fix it. Maybe we have time now to make this thing work.
Yeah, but you have, most of the time you can just avoid it in your work.
Exactly.
Kids, whatever the case may be.
Yep.
But right now, you can't avoid it.
And that's the point. You're exactly right. That is the point.
And so that's, I think a lot of good things are going to come out of this in that way. The financial thing, I have my own views on it. We're not going to talk about that. If you want to know, you can go to 29 and 28 episode and you can hear all about my silly rantings about it. But for the most part, it's we just we have to figure out how to move forward with everyone. And, great leaders don't lead. They bring people up around them to help them lead. You know what I mean? By, you bring people up, you raise people up to the level of your leadership. You know what I mean? And to make them kind of like you. And if we had more of that, and I think, people like myself doing what I'm doing, you doing what you're doing, and a whole host of other people, thousands of them right now are figuring out their place and, how they can contribute. You got people making masks, everybody's kind of like trying to figure out how they can help.
Yeah. Well, that is the one thing that Americans are really, really good at. Unlike any other country that I've been around. And I've traveled extensively to more than 25 countries. And I mean, not just like sort of passed through, but spent some serious time there. And I don't know of many countries that are better at rallying behind their cause, and Americans are really good at that when the stuff is down, man, there's a lot of people that'll come, jump on board and help you out. Just like you just said, even down to making masks. I mean, you think about the World War II, and I'm no history buff, but it was the same circumstance. People rallied around this cause that we were going to stop, the Nazi movement and the Japanese movement, if you will, but primarily the Nazi thing. That and so, the men went to war, volunteered, jumped in, drafted, whatever, went to war, and the women went straight into the factories, man, started building bombs and all these sorts of things. So the point is that throughout the history of the United States, 9/11 was another thing, people in the United States, man, that I have this deep appreciation for the ability to rally around a cause,
Yeah.
And to your point, good leaders develop good causes. They that's in my way of thinking that good leaders have to be visionary. They come up with a good vision about what they think and the people thinks that needs to happen, and then inspires the people, to your point, to step up there and get behind that cause. That's a key point there.
Yeah, for sure. What else here? There was something else I was going to say. You caught my attention on something, but I lost it.
You sound like me now.
Yeah. What was your? So here's something in here that's an interesting question. You gave up. Oh, your dream was being a musician. That's what you gave up on to go to the military.
Yep.
And then you also your mother passed away when you were 16. Yep. What was that like, man? Because me and my mom are really close, and she's getting up there in age. But I don't know what I would have done if she would have if I didn't have her.
Yeah, obviously 16. That was a long time ago, and but I can still remember. I think one of the keys is that my mother. Well, first of all, my mother, in my way of thinking, was, at least in my world at the time, was a pretty unique individual. She was a Puerto Rican from the island, and she, and she existed a lot in an environment, around Americans that she didn't know the culture as well. She, again, grew up on the island. That's where my dad met her, and so I would say that she had a communication, sort of a language problem, because she did. Although she had a very, very thick accent. In fact, we were just laughing the other day, my brothers and sisters and I, that friends would come over to the house and she would, speak to them for a second. I mean, they'd look dead at me and say, "What'd she say?" I'm like, "Dude, you didn't understand that?" She said, how's your day going, or something, whatever it was, So, but anyways, but she was a very special person, and her and I were very, very close. And she essentially, she didn't have a heart attack. It was a very unique, rare condition that she had, a respiratory. And she woke up one morning, and the phone had rang, and she woke up and reached over to answer the phone, and it was a wrong number. And I understand this from my sister, who happened to be sleeping with her at the time at that night. And she hung the phone up and had a respiratory attack and then died. I mean, pretty much instantly. And, I'm almost getting goosebumps thinking about the shock of it all that I never forget. I don't think I've ever said this, to be honest with you, Sean. The thing that I remember the most is I heard a lot of yelling, and I jumped out of my bed. We lived upstairs, or excuse me, I slept upstairs, and my mother's room was downstairs. And I was running down the stairs. My sister was running up, and she just screamed that, my mom is dead. And I just couldn't even I just woke up. I couldn't even process that. And so, the initial shock, of course, was incredible. But I think that the part that I reflect on now the most is a couple of things. One, each time a big event happens, it's something that I miss. I often wonder, so she'd be 84 now, what she'd be like, and that sorts of things. And my wife, she's never met my wife, or obviously her grandkids and those sorts of things. So, but I think, like a lot of people, I live with these incredible memories. I really do. That's what stays in my head more than anything else. There's some very, very unique memories about her. I remember when we used to go, like I said, we lived all around the world. And when we would come back to the States, if we weren't living overseas, oftentimes it was back to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, which is a big military installation. Well, it's where the Special Forces headquarters is, and my dad was Special Forces. So it was kind of like, every few years we'd end up coming back. Well, my dad had purchased a house, a small house way back when. And so we would rent it and then come back and live in it and go back. So I had kind of two lives. I had the life of living on military installations and being deep into the military. And then we'd come back, and not all the time, by the way. Then sometimes we'd live in Rayford, the small town. It was a very small town. It was only like 2,000 people, very rural town. And so we got to know, if there was any place that we got to know people, it was in this small town, because we kept coming and going. But it was always kind of like, I would show up, let's say in the 6th grade, and people were like, "Where you been?" I was like, "Oh, well, we went to Germany." "What? Germany?" "Yeah." And come back. Then we'd leave again. I'd come back in like the 8th or 9th grade. They said, "Dude, where you been?" Or some people actually wouldn't even notice it. They were like, "Man, boy, it seems like forever since I've seen you, but it's only been a year." I was like, "No, I've been gone for 3 years."
Yeah.
So anyways, so the people were, very rural, very southern, beautiful people there. But I remember people were very intrigued, and we met most of these people by way of the church that we went to. But they were very intrigued by my mother, because she was Puerto Rican and she had this thick accent. It was just very unusual. I mean, this was primarily, again, a rural, small town of primarily almost exclusively whites and then blacks. I mean, we had a pretty big African-American community there. But in any event, I remember like even affluent people would sometimes that just, I don't know, took a liking to my mother for whatever reason. And we were just military people, And I can still remember, I still hear it in my head where I'll never forget her name. Her name was Doris Hostetler. She was from a very affluent family. Her husband was a lawyer and then a judge and mayor and all this kind of stuff. But she would just stroll up on her bicycle on a Saturday morning, and I'd be in the kitchen, and my mother might be, and all of a sudden from outside of the house, like right by the kitchen, I'd hear this voice go, Nareda, which was her name, Nareda, Nareda. And it was just the most beautiful sound. And then my mother would go out there and they would have this conversation. And it was just a beautiful thing. It kind of means nothing, but it was just a beautiful thought that popped into my head. So anyways, the point that you bring up there in part about my mother passing away, the book that I wrote, The Gap Between Two Worlds, is on major life change and transitions. And it's one of the things that I highlight in the book. I highlight that as a big, a big sort of a pivot point in my life that caused a lot of obvious change and transition that, of course, many, many people experience. The other thing was the constant change, the constant move of being in the military for almost 40 years. I mean, literally 2, 3, 4. I think one time I stayed 5 years in a place, but and I'm not talking about just moving around the States. I've lived in pretty much all 4 corners of the States, lived in Germany several times, lived in Puerto Rico, lived in Israel, lived in California. I think I told you twice, actually. Yeah. And, Texas, Massachusetts, Georgia, North Carolina, just the list goes on. And the point is that I recognize that this part of my life was not, I don't even know if I could call it change and transition anymore. It's just the way that I live. When I got out of the military and moved from California, I told you from Travis Air Force Base, which is right there by Vacaville and Fairfield, as you well know. Yeah. Moved from there to Tennessee, to a smaller town just outside of Nashville. And it was the first time that I'd ever settled down in my life. And I'm 40 years old at the time. And man, I try to tell people that was like moving to China without any preparation, because I knew nothing about the private sector settling down. I mean, when 2 years came around, it was like, we got to do something, but I held my horses and and we stayed, and we do really, really like it here. But the point is that after I got out of the Air Force, which is the one that I consider the biggest and greatest transitions of my life, frankly, because I had just lost my way. I got out and had this honeymoon period. I'm going to go out there and conquer the world as a consultant and speaker and personal growth specialist and all these sorts of things. But I didn't have a clue about running a business or even living without a structure of the military. And about a year into the process, I sunk into a pretty doggone dark place, a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety. And I'm talking about the type that put me on my back. I ended up with these bulging discs and pain all up and down. I mean, literally, I couldn't move. And then, of course, that physical pain exacerbated my mental pain, and then my mental pain, and it just became this vicious cycle. And after about a couple of months of that, my wife, I say, for me, I won't turn this into a religious conversation, but for me, it was a good wife and a good God, made me start reevaluating my life at that point, because, I realized that that I had gotten myself into this place where I got seriously stuck, and which is what the book is really about. Stuck, not understanding what to do, because my emotions took over, my anxiety, my depression. And so what happened is my wife began to encourage me to go out and start journaling about this. I mean, because I was just hunkered down, in a overly stated, but in a fetal position, man. I just couldn't move. I didn't know what to do. I cried. I just felt a lot of loneliness and pain and hopeless. And that's all that kind of stuff that you've heard before. So she really encouraged, she started really studying depression. And one of the things she did, she said, Kevin, I want you to go out this morning and I want you to take your laptop and go to Panera Bread or Starbucks or whatever and just start typing. I was like, type what? She was like, just type whatever you're feeling. Just there, you don't have to start anywhere. Just start it. And essentially she was encouraging me to journal. And I started doing that. And I did it for about a month. And first of all, lo and behold, it helped a lot. Why? I was getting that stuff out of my head, for starters. And it was starting to, now you have to remember, Sean, at this point, I had been involved in personal development, change and transition for years. And I couldn't get myself out of this pickle. I mean, but it didn't dawn on me at the time. But what happened is as I started journaling and just talking about how I was feeling, the problems I was running into, the things that I was afraid of and all this kind of stuff, I was also at the same time unknowingly coaching myself. I was using the stuff that I had learned that I didn't even know I had learned on, again, personal development, whatever it is, So after about 30 days of doing that, I started feeling better. And I remember one day I had finished typing and I put it on a jump drive. I went across the street to this office supply place. I asked them if they'd print it out. Man, I took back this big thing that I had been typing for 30 days and I took it to my wife and I printed out, took it to her. I said, yeah, I just, I was thanking her for really helping me and making me do that. And I said, here's what I've been basically writing about. And so that day she read it, at least most of it. And the next morning I said, so what'd you think? She said, Kevin, you've been forever talking about writing a book. And there it is right there. She said, you're not just talking about how you feel. And she was really one that kind of alerted me. She said, man, you put some stuff in there that I don't even know where that came from, but it can help a lot of people. And that's when I started actually writing the book. So all of that to make a long story shorter comes down to what you just said. All of this change and transition in my life has, and I'm not trying to pitch my book. I mean, but the point is that all of that, yielded a book, that was not only cathartic, but, hopefully helps people as well. With their own change and transition. And I will say real quick that what is most relevant right now for people who are listening that might be interested is understanding. So the gap between two worlds, Sean, represents something fairly simple. And there's a lot of, matter of fact, William Bridges, who is out there in your area, well, he passed away a few years ago, but he was like the god of change and transition. He wrote a bunch of books on change and transition. He's really one of the icons in that world. He's right out there in the San Francisco area. His wife still lives there. I think in Nevada, if I'm not mistaken. But in any event, what's important for your listeners to know now is that the gap between two worlds represents this. There's the old world and there's the new world. Okay, so here's where you are or where you were, and here's where you're going. In between that is the gap. And the gap is the transition. And that's what people need to be conscious of right now, is that they are in the gap. Whatever they're doing, things have changed and they're in transition. And the problem is, especially with this type of pandemic that has no history behind it, it's new to all of us. We're trying to sort out, okay, exactly what's that new world going to look like? And so what I like to say to also express that metaphor is that the gap is what we call the in-between place. And I encourage listeners and anybody I talk to about change and transition is to first and foremost recognize that you're in the in-between place and not to get stuck there. There's Winston Churchill had a saying where he said, if you find yourself in hell, keep moving. And that's my advice to people, is that you're in an in-between place. It can be scary. It can be unknowing because you don't really know what's going to happen. I mean, imagine a person who lost their job. Imagine even more a person who completely shut down their business and no real hope on striking that business back up. You see, their old world was their business And the new world is what? And so my point to them is, one, you're in the gap. There will be a foggy place, what I call the foggy zone. It's in the middle. It's very cloudy. It's very disorienting. It's very frightful. It's all these sorts of things, frustrating. And what I say is, one, is to keep moving. Don't get stuck. Don't let your mind conquer you and yield you incapable of thinking your way through this. And you can.
Yeah, that's a good, well said.
Thank you.
I also think that right now is a good time for people. You know, we're all in isolation, and that means a lot of different things. That means, I mean, for people that are addicts out there, that's what they crave. They crave isolation so they can get away from everybody to continue being stuck in their sickness and whatnot. And I just want to encourage everybody out there that if you are in a situation where you are isolated and you don't have, you know, you're not being with people, or, you know, even reaching out and communicating with people, figure out a way to engage with folks, whether it's, you know, and if you can't find any groups that you can, you know, jump on, you know, doing Zoom chats or Zoom meetings, or, you know, there's a lot of Facebook groups out there that you can probably find something at. And if nothing else, be the one that does it on your own. I mean, you get it free. If you download Zoom, you get free 40 minutes for 3 people, or you don't have to have a membership.
Be that leader, man. That's right.
Start it. You know, be the one that starts it. You know, a lot of times when you want to do something, you can't find it. The best way to do it is just do it yourself. You know, don't be afraid. You got to learn somehow. And so we've got connection there. All right. So connection and then meaning. All right. What is one thing that, you know, and it goes to, you said you were getting all these ailments and stuff when you were depressed. You lacked connection. You lacked meaning, meaning you didn't, your mindset, you didn't have anything.
Completely. Lost my way, buddy.
Yeah. You didn't have anything that you were aspiring to do. You were searching for meaning, but hadn't found it yet. And then once you found that meaning in your life, the thing that made you want to have to get up the next day and continue on, that is what helps to pull people out. So you got connection, meaning, and then just drive, you know, that's, and keep putting, you know, stay in motion.
Stay in motion.
Start.
It's very, very important. You know, you're so right about that. And that's part of the process of moving through the gap and trying to get out of the stuck place, the in-between place, primarily the foggy zone. And that is using what I call your powers to be. That I mentioned earlier that many of us have no idea about our own potential. And one of the things that these sorts of events, or frankly, any struggle, any friction in your life, and you know, there's opportunity there. And one of the opportunities is, in fact, to exercise your powers. And so one power, to your, you know, basically piggybacking on your point, is the power to, I know this is going to shock you, but the power to think, the power to visualize, the power to ask questions. So to your point, and by the way, yeah, if you're isolated, it's very difficult. But this is what coaches do, and you don't have to have a coach to do this. But if you were a close friend of mine and I felt really isolated and felt like I had really kind of lost my way about anything, it doesn't matter. Let's say I lost my job. I'd call you up and say, Sean, I would, with the knowledge that I have now as a coach, I would do this. I would say, Sean, man, I lost my job. I think I told you a couple of weeks ago, and I'm just stuck, man. I can't even think straight anymore. You know, can you just help me think? You see where I'm going with this?
Yeah.
and you get it. And you're like, okay, well, what are you stuck on, Kevin? And so that immediately provokes that question itself, starts the conversation and starts the thinking. And then the process of what I call masterminding or collaborating in this discussion and you helping me out, you're helping me think through this. And but see, these are powers that we have that are right in front of us. I mean, they're just there. Yeah, some people think better than others. Some people can visualize better. I get all that, but it's not exclusive to one individual. And if you're not a good thinker, or if you are too freaked out in your head, you do exactly that. You call up Sean and say, Sean, man, my head is just all over the place. I can't seem to settle down. Can you just talk me through this a little bit? Help me get out of my own head. That's a power, power of relationships. There's so many powers that we have, but we don't exercise them. And you brought out such an incredible point, and that is that perhaps like addicts, there are also people that when they get into this position of like the pandemic or losing a job or a whole host, their spouse leaves them, I don't care what it is, that they clam up, they go into isolation. They don't want to tell anybody, they're embarrassed, or it could be all kinds of things. I'll be honest with you, I'm completely opposite. And part of this is because of my own knowledge that I've garnered through this is I got a handful of really close friends and any one of them will tell you, yeah, Kevin will call me in a heartbeat and say, help me think this out.
Yeah. That's great. Mm-hmm. And, cooperation, I mean, that's how we, the United States or exactly actually humanity has gotten to where it has is our ability to cooperate.
Yes, with
one another and exchange ideas and work on a project. And okay, here we go. And there's no, it's not a mistake. It's not a coincidence either.
And that's a power too, isn't it? Though the power to cooperate and collaborate.
Yep, for sure.
I deal with people all the time in corporate America and organizations that, and again, this is part of that program that I was telling you about, Get the Edge for young people is teaching them how to be collaborative. How do you be a good team member?
Yeah. Yeah, I was talking to a guy down in Texas just before the interview that I'm going to have to call him up and say, hey, we need to do it again because my end.
My technology broke down on me.
Yeah, my technology screwed you. But what was I going to say? Damn it, I lost it. Oh well.
And you're starting to sound more and more like me.
Yeah.
I'm notorious.
Yeah, sometimes I'll have a thought and it'll just go. Oh, there, I know what it is. It was he has a podcast network. So it's like everybody, he's a coach and he's into, varsity blues, if you think about that, how Texas football is, high school football. And he's a big part of that with he knows a lot of the coaches and everything else. And so he started this podcast network. And so anything that has to do with Texas and you have a podcast, whether you're a podcaster in Texas, whether you have a podcast that's about Texas or you're not from Texas, anything that has to do with it, he's got in this network. Wow. And I was thinking, I was like, and I'd thought about this before, is building a community, a network myself. But I don't have the know-how to do any of that. I just I have a lot of ideas, but the know-how isn't there of
I understand that
where to go. You know what I mean? How to put the pieces together.
Yeah.
But having a network in the personal development space where you have a number of different people that are in this network of yours, whether it's, because there's a lot of different aspects to coaching, personal development coaching. You've got the financial end of it. You've got the mental end of it. You've got psychology that's in it. And all of that goes into building your ideal you. You know what I mean? There's all these pieces that are in this space that you have to touch on if you want to be, successfully, transform yourself.
You mean as a coach or a person being coached? I suppose both.
What do you mean?
But I'm saying that, that these components that you're talking about, are you talking about a person that is trying to become a coach, or a person that's being coached to be transformed?
Well, no, all these people, like somebody that it's like a one-stop shop. You know what I mean?
Oh, I see.
So you created this network, right? You've got your authors in there. You've got, your coaches. You've got, whatever it is, fitness people that are in there. You've got other,
I see.
Anything that has to do with your health.
Oh, very interesting. Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
But in like more of a holistic,
Yeah.
holistic way. You'd have,
Yeah.
You'd have marijuana people that are in there that are on the CBD side, and talking about their stuff. You've got the THC people that, because that helps too. I mean, I think that, I'm a consumer of edibles, and I used it to get off of a 7-year opiate addiction, and that was after I was addicted to meth for 15 years.
Are you serious, man?
Oh yeah, for sure.
I knew that a little bit about you, but I didn't know it was 15 years, man. Wow.
I should have sent out the one where I was the story where I was a guest on somebody else's podcast, and
I'd love to hear it.
That one actually takes you through the craziness of my life, like as far as like the criminality of it, some instances where I get into when I got raided and how that was
Wow.
What else am I doing?
You've been around the block a little bit, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, like forging, fraud and forgery was one of my big things. And then also counterfeiting, I was involved in that as well, counterfeiting money. And so, I mean, I went back and listened to it the other day because I was going to send that in with the other one. And I was like, after I listened to it, I was like, you should probably just be sending this one out because you'd actually had a little bit more experience on the mic, because my first one, that was my first attempt at doing this at all. And it was one take. That was it. I didn't have to do a bunch of them. I just did it one time and put it out there.
I don't want to take over your show, but I have to tell you, I'm just curious as all get out. What turned you around? What was it that turned you around?
I mean, it was a culmination of different things. Mostly, it was just I was just tired of being a piece of shit.
Oh wow!
I wasn't. I started thinking about how old I was. I mean, my early 30s. And I was like, it's, and I'd already been to prison. So when I got out, I towed the line for a little bit, but I still had things I wanted to accomplish. And it's funny to say that, as like, I still had criminal activities that I knew that were out there that I wanted to do, and I wasn't done. And I found him. I found what I wanted, and, manifest it. The secret.
Wow. Yeah.
It works. It doesn't matter what. It just depends on where you put the energy at. You can use it for good. You can use it for bad. I was always told when I was a kid from my grandfather. He's like, you're a leader, and unfortunately, I chose to use that in the wrong way. I had people that I was leading, but I was leading them into doing criminal activities and other stuff that was, for my gain and, manipulation and, just being a person that I didn't like. And I think that's what it really came down to. I just would look in the mirror and I didn't like what was looking back at me.
That's powerful stuff, man.
Yeah. And then I had all of these other things, and I was like the Tasmanian devil. If I came into your life, that's exactly what I was going to do to it.
Were you a mean dude?
I could be. When I get drunk, if I go past a certain point, I go to the dark side. And with meth, it was something different, and that's where I realized I was ADHD, because most tweakers, when they get on it, they've got 1,000 things that are around them that are unfinished. They start a project and they can't finish it. For me, it was like, you remember that Bradley Cooper movie, No Limits?
Oh yeah. Love that movie.
That's exactly what meth was like for me.
Wow.
Okay. So I would take it, and then I would nonstop be on the computer trying to figure something out, whether it was how to exploit vulnerabilities in systems with credit cards and identity theft. And I would literally go for 3 days straight, not eating, not sleeping, until I crashed, and then I would wake back up and continue until I finished it. And so that's where I realized that was that. And so, I mean, for me, a lot of my experiences weren't bad. You know what I mean? They were fun. And and when I wasn't high, I couldn't do those kind of things because I wasn't interested in it. So and it also, it was really easy for me to I'm getting off a little bit, and I'll make it back around to your question. So for me, identity theft is what I ended up doing in the end, and I found comfort there. And
interesting.
The reason why I found comfort there is because when I grew up, when I was a kid, I got teased a lot about being as dark as I am because I was in an all-white neighborhood. Well, not all white, but I mean, the majority of it, you know what I mean? And I was smaller and younger. And so I would get teased about, being a Mexican and all these other things. And I believe I was born in 73. So around that time would probably be the time where Harry Anslinger started talking about, or the tail end of, Anslinger and the Mexican reefer madness and all that stuff. And so, I didn't like who I was. And so through stealing somebody's identity, I could be whoever I wanted.
Wow. That's crazy. I never thought about it that way.
So it didn't have to be in me anymore. I could be whoever's identity I took over, and credit cards that I was getting issued in their name. Because I'd figured out how to, get around some of the security questions, or, if I had to, and I'm not going to say how I did it because I don't want to give anybody any ideas about how to do it, but I just figured out how to do some stuff. And so it was very comforting for me to do that. And it was exciting. And, but I mean, it wasn't real. Right. And it took having to be on meth for me to be able to do that, because I mean, not that I ever saw anybody that I was, whose identity that I stole, or, knew of any of the things that I would do. And I would always justify it, because whenever we would use these things or do these things, the banks would catch it way before the victim would even know. And so, I mean, there might be a little bit of what's the word I'm looking for? Inconvenience to them, and not to make light of it, because I'm sure everybody's situation is different that's experienced something like that. Some people, are horrible experiences when they get their identity stolen.
Yeah.
It was bad no matter what, but I'm just going to leave it at that, because it really sounds like I'm justifying it.
No. I hear you. I get it. Yeah.
And so there was just a lot of that, and I'd manipulated people from the time I was that I can remember. Everybody had served a purpose to me, and I mean, to the point where I didn't even I think about all the relationships that I was in, and the people, and it's like I love myself. I didn't love anybody else. I didn't even know what love was until I had a kid, and that taught me what love was, and because of that feeling, you know what I mean, that you have for your children. And I mean, it caused me to go, well, God, thinking back on it, I mean, this is really what love is, and this is what it's supposed to feel like, and that you'd be willing to do anything for that person. I don't think I've been there with another human being, with the opposite sex. So, there's a lot but you have to be willing to look at that.
Yeah.
And then take your own inventory of bad behavior.
Yeah.
Because we all have something, we all have something that we do that, we wish that we didn't.
No question.
And so it was just a culmination of a bunch of different things, timing. Yeah. I was getting ready to have to go do a violation because I'd gotten into trouble. I was lucky. I didn't catch any new charges, even though I got arrested for doing some bad stuff still. And it was just time. And that's the only way I don't know.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, ultimately it sounds like you know, I guess they say you hit rock bottom, you know, you just like, man, it's got to be something better than this, you know?
Yeah, but I mean, you would have thought that prison was rock bottom, you know.
I would think, yeah.
You know, you would have thought that I've almost died a number of different times, you know, from ODs to accidents, car wrecks. Here's one. When I was living in Vegas, my first daughter's mom, who had my rights terminated after this incident, she had gone to California to go visit her family. And my daughter's about, I would say maybe a year old, 12 months old. 14 months, a year to 14 months. She goes back to Fairfield. Her parents are from Fairfield. She goes back there, takes my daughter, leaves me with her car, doesn't tell me that she left the insurance lap on it, right? So I go out, and it's a Friday night. It's a Christmas Eve, right? In Vegas, that shit doesn't matter. There's clubs that are still open, you know.
Right.
So I went to a nightclub. I was taking at the time GHB. I don't know if you know what that is. It's one of the date rape drugs, but bodybuilders use it, and so I was taking that. And somehow I remember leaving the Rum Jungle at Mandalay Bay, and I vaguely remember going over the overpass down Flamingo Boulevard or Flamingo Road. And then the next thing that I remember, I hit a telephone pole or a light pole.
Oh, God.
All right. So I tacoed. So I mean, right into it, right? Dead straight in the center of the thing. And the pole, bam, tacoed the top of it, right? I wasn't wearing any seatbelt, I don't believe, or anything. I popped right out of it.
Oh,
I jumped right out of the car, out of the truck or her SUV, and I'm staring at it. I'm going, holy shit, what the, and
that's crazy.
Yeah. Well, that's not even the craziest part. Okay. The craziest part is that I walked across the street as if nothing happened to the 7-Eleven, went and bought a Gatorade. The lady that's behind the counter is just like looking at me going, oh, like, what the you just came from that, and now you're buying Gatorade. And she sold it to me, and then I walked back over there. I got right back into the SUV because I knew I'd left my the GHB in there. Took another capful. That's how my mentality was, okay? And so that's not the end of it. I blacked out again, and I wake up in front of a drive-through, and this was in the morning, so nothing was open really, right? It had just turned light, so it's probably like 6, maybe 7 o'clock in the morning. So the next place I'm at is I'm right in in a drive-through right down the street. I'd walked there, blacked out, and I'm standing there just like nodding and moving back and forth. I don't know how I'm not falling, but I'm not conscious. And I got my bearings after I woke up there, and I went and looked around, and I'm like, oh shit, where was I at?
Wow.
And I see the SUV, and it's being loaded up on a tow truck, right?
Flatbed or whatever.
Yeah, flatbed. Mm-hmm. And so it's right there, and I caught the dude right before, and I'm, oh, wait, that's mine. And I ran over there, grabbed the bottle again, took another cap, and blacked out again. This time when I came to, I was inside the liquor store, which had I went this much further to the left or this much further to the right of that telephone pole, would have ran me right into that liquor store, through it. So I go in there and blacked out again, and I'm in front of the porno display doing the same thing. This time the cops come in, because by this time they showed up on the scene, right? And the ambulance and everything else. They think that I've had a head trauma. because of, just
Yeah.
like I'm dazed. They can't smell any alcohol on me. They don't know what I'm on. When they're leading me up to into the ambulance, and I come to again, and I'm like, oh, and I start like this, and they're like wrestling me into the deal, and yeah. They leave. The ambulance driver's taking me to the hospital, and he's like, dude, quit bullshitting. What the fuck are you on? And I'm like, I'm not on nothing. He's like, dude, you're not going to get in trouble. Trouble's already gone. And, so I told him, and then as soon as I got there, I jammed. But
Wow.
Do you want to know how much that cost?
I'm scared to ask.
$98. That was the ticket that I was issued for that. $98 from the state for the repair or the replacement of that light pole.
Wow.
So, I mean, there is nonstop stories like that in my life of where that wasn't the end. You know what I mean? That didn't wake you up.
Either you got 9 lives or somebody was looking out for you.
No, it was somebody who was looking out for me for sure.
Yeah.
Whether I don't know what it is, but there's a lot of instances like that where I almost, I could have died, and I can count at least 5 of them. So yeah, it takes what it takes. I just hope that that people. That was a lot to go through. I mean, that was literally 15 years of my life of just chaos. Just imagine a Tasmanian devil rolling around for 15 years. And then finally it's like you run out of gas and you're like, I'm done ruining everybody else's life alongside mine.
That's mind blowing. What a story.
Yeah.
Really. What a testimony that I've not even heard. Probably close to the full story.
No, and it's. I try to think about it. In a lot of ways, I feel like I was possessed by something, because I couldn't escape it. And no matter how hard I tried, I mean, I had good intentions, but they just got corrupted. They would get corrupted by something. Whether it was lack of discipline from being a latchkey kid and not having any nobody telling me yes or no, discipline thing that you're talking about. The kind of self-esteem that I was gaining was through hurting people, or getting over on people, or, getting over on the system, which is, but it's nothing you can take with you.
Right.
You know what I mean? You can't put that on a piece of paper and have it mean anything.
Yeah. And you know this much better than I do, that you're probably one of the lucky ones or the blessed ones, however you want to put that you actually came out of this. I mean, there are probably untold number of people that never escaped that, never saw the light of day, either because they died or ended up in prison their entire life, or they're just still like that, or they're homeless or whatever it is. I mean, that's pretty compelling. And it seems to me, well, I can't help but to go here as a personal development coach, and frankly, as a spiritual man as well, is that, again, I'll just say it, you can decide if you want to edit it out. But for me, I think something like that, one, God is trying to tell you something, and God needs to use you for something. And that's just my perspective. So I'll just leave it at that. That's what I think, though.
Well, I mean, God, universe. I mean, it's all the same thing. It's just a package that we put. So I use universe, and that's the package that I have to use to be able to wrap my head around the whole God thing. Yeah. I have a block when it comes to religion and God.
Understand.
All right.
Yeah.
But when I put it in the context of universe and energy, you know what I mean? And universe may take the place of God, and energy takes the place of God, and universe takes the place of religion. However I do it, that's what works for me now. And I don't knock anybody that subscribes to religion or that. I have a problem with it, because everything that man touches, he corrupts.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, but you're distinguishing there in my way of thinking, and a lot of people are sort of veering away from there, even very sort of people that are extraordinarily religious. A lot of people are getting away from this, are separating the two concepts of religion versus spirituality. And I'm talking about even Christians. I know plenty of people that are very dedicated Christians, but they're not all that keen to religion for exactly the point that you just made, is that man, there is an innate thing about man that wants to do it man's way. And so once that happens, then man can corrupt things. So a lot of people are distinguishing the difference between the religion and the spiritual aspect. And I would say that I do the same thing. I'm okay with religion because I believe religion is man-made, but it's just a structure that you build to help you carry out your spirituality. I don't really see it much more than that. I mean, it's not any different in my way of thinking to call, there's the church and then there's a church. A church is just a building. It's a building. It's not any more than that. But the church in a spiritual, in a biblical state is the people. You see, so it depends on how you look at it, but I see it a little bit differently, maybe even a lot different. I'm not sure. I believe, same thing like science. Of course, I believe in science. I believe in energy. That's science. I believe the universe. I believe in all of that stuff. I just happen to believe that that's what God created for us to exist within, and that's the distinction that I make. I don't, people. I don't really get into fights about religion or spiritual. I just don't. I profess what I believe, and everybody can believe whatever they believe. But for instance, when people want to argue, science versus religion, I'm like, dude, I mean, anybody that doesn't believe in science is kind of foolish. I mean, just jump from a four-story building, you'll see how science works. My only point is that all you're doing when you explain science is, again, this is my way of thinking, you just explain what God created. That's all. It's all there. It's all fundamentally there. Even the thing, if you want to call it the secret, I believe in that. But again, to me, it's all part of the spiritual component that God created. It's not something separate from that. It's just that, as you well know, depending on who you ask, they explain this. You go read the book, The Secret, which it was a fascinating book, and I read it and I listened to the CD and all that kind of stuff. But you can kind of explain The Secret in about 5 minutes. It's not really that mystical. It's pretty practical, quite frankly. It's just a manifestation of your thoughts,
Or your energy.
And the energy you put into it. That's exactly right. So if I wanted to say something like, and in fact, I do explain this way in a very practical sense. So this is overly simplistic, but it's the most simplest form of The Secret. I'm hungry. Thought, right? You have to act on a thought, right, to make it happen. So you're going to manifest it. I'm going to go get something to eat. And you go get something to eat. I mean, again, I grant you it's oversimplification of it, but it's still the same principle as The Secret, manifesting your thoughts.
Yeah, well, usually when you're trying to let's just use making a podcast. Right, you said that's what I'm going to put as my goal. I'm going to make a podcast. I'm going to manifest this amazing thing for myself. Okay, well, what do you do when you're constantly putting thought into it? You're thinking about it. You're researching it. You're finding this. You're finding that. You're getting your pieces. You're putting them together. But your antenna and the signals that you're putting out there, you're hyper aware of what it is that you're doing.
You got it.
You know what I mean? And so you're able to. So anything that's coming in at you, you're able to.
You're taking notice of it.
Yeah, but we have opportunities that we miss out on all the time when we're not paying attention to things.
100%.
Whether it's listening to somebody that's talking about something that is in the same area that you are, and using that opportunity as an in to start a conversation and find out a little bit more about that person that's in that had that keyword podcast come out of his mouth, and now okay, what podcast? What did you say? Let's talk about this.
Yeah.
But if you weren't thinking about podcasts, somebody would say podcasts, and you would just you don't even notice it. Yeah. It's almost like when you buy a car. Okay, all of a sudden now you notice every single car like that.
Yeah, you buy the car thinking I'm going to buy it because it's unique. I never see it around, and then suddenly it's everywhere.
Yeah, then you're taking notice that car now is every time you see one. Oh, hey, look there's a blue one. Oh, there's a silver one.
The other component to that is the concept of your subconscious. That, and again, I don't separate this from what I believe in God, but that because your subconscious was designed to do this. So, as you well know, pretty much of what we do, even as I'm moving my hands here, my subconscious is making that happen because it's what I've learned to do. And so your subconscious actually, runs your life. So then you have to ask the question, what is in your subconscious? And if you ask what is in your subconscious, then you have to ask, how did it get there? And if it got there through all your senses and now runs the way that you do things, including your habits and your thoughts and all those sorts of things, then of course the whole notion even with the secret law of attraction, all those sorts of things, comes down to this, that what you think and believe causes you to behave in certain ways. And therefore what you do, i.e. behaviors, creates the results that you get into your life. And so if that's true, what you do flows out of what you see, and what you get flows out of what you do, then logic suggests that the results you get in life not just flow out of what you do, they flow out of what you see. So now we're arguing, now we're making the case about the law of attraction and what you think and believe. And so then the suggestion is this, that if you want to change something, results that you're getting in life, okay, yeah, you have to change some behaviors, some habits, or whatever the case might be, but ultimately you have to change what you believe. So if I believe this is a very evil world, the law of attraction, if you will, or the secret will manifest that. Why? Because of what you just said. So let's say you grew up all your life and your parents and maybe the community you lived in just kind of drilled into you that that the world is just an evil place. So now project yourself 40 years later, and I'm going to ask you, Sean, if you learned this all of your life, and now this is what you believe, that the world is an evil, dangerous place, how might you be behaving? Give me some examples of how you might behave.
Very defensive, apprehensive.
Take it dark.
Closed off, isolated.
Boom. Somebody walks up to your door and what?
Well, somebody walks up to your door. For me, I would just not answer it. But I mean, if we're in a, let's use, we could possibly be on the brink of something that may not be very, very pleasant.
Correct. So all of that
coming once this. We're in the easy part of this pandemic.
Yes.
Right. This is Candyland right here.
Yeah.
We're all safe. We're all getting money. That's somehow, whether you're still working, whether you're getting money from unemployment, everybody's taken care of right now. Maybe a little bit inconvenient, but what next? Okay. Yeah. The financial part, that's what is going to make or break this thing. Seriously.
No question. The financial part and what people do. And so we're kind of back to the same concept, that because I also believe that the not only the individual conscience, your subconscious and your mind, influences how you behave, therefore the results you get. The same is very practical in what we call, in my work and the guy that you interviewed that was an organizational psychologist. You ask them about corporate culture. Well, it's the same thing, that people collectively start behaving in the way that the culture of the organization is. So if you're in an organization, a company, whether it's a construction company or a corporate company, and the leadership and the establishment over the years has created a culture that suggests the following, that in this company, as employees, we do not take risks. We do not take risks. Well, that's what we call corporate company. So that's the same thing as a collective belief. And so therefore, how do people behave? Well, they behave very safe. They don't do things that are risky. So the same thing exists in our mind. So now you go back to the same person that has this belief, this deep-seated belief that the world is an evil place. Yes, he acts exactly in the way that you said, all the way down to these same people that end up becoming recluses for that purpose, you see. And so that's how they behave. And so what is the result of their life? Well, it's isolated. It could be range anything from anger to fear to living and all these other sorts of things.
Ted
so now
Kaczynski.
take that. Yes, no, that's exactly right. 100% right. So now take that same person and now you're his coach or her coach, and you say, okay, I'm going to coach you to be to live a better life, one that's filled with joy and yada, yada, yada. And so you start talking about things that he can do or she can do. Well, so when you see people, instead of crossing the street when they're coming to you, why don't you smile at them and say good morning? So they do that, but they haven't changed their beliefs about that. You see where I'm going with this? And that's my point, is that ultimately what you feed, and this is where, again, sort of if you want to say the secret or the law of attraction of all those things, that the way that this works is as you feed your mind, your subconscious, you're basically telling it and training it how to direct your body, how to direct your actions. And so this is the piece that you can't see, because you have to obviously do things consciously. So if I want to become wealthy, or if I want to create a podcast, and my dream is to create a podcast and a coaching business and live anywhere I want in the world, live in Gimmelwald, Switzerland. So that's what I want to do, and I want to manifest that. So first of all, I might, and I would, put a conscious plan together. And the plan would include visualizing it. Okay, so how much money do I need to make, and plan, and all these sorts of things, and then start doing the things that would churn out those results. But what if you believed that wouldn't really happen? You see where it starts now your subconscious comes into play. But the more that you feed your mind and your subconscious this understanding of what it needs to do to direct your involuntary habits, you have, I guess you could say, doubled your money, doubled your chances of achieving that. So you see, from my way of thinking, when you talk about the secret of law of attraction, it's a very practical thing that, again, I'm going to say, I think God created it. I don't think it's like this thing that just accidentally happened. And so now let me just get back to that last point that sort of brought all of this into the discussion, and that is that I just don't separate those two things. You can explain not you personally, I'm not taking any issue with what you're saying, but people can explain all these things scientifically and mystically and psychologically and extraterrestrially.
Extraterrestrially?
I don't even know if that's a word, extraterrestrially. You can explain all of those stuff, and I simply say all of that could very well be true. I just believe that God created it. That's my thinking. Now, when you get into, of course, the concept of Jesus and Christianity, it of course involves a whole different concept, and that is, of course, your belief in who Jesus was and what he did, which I do believe, but I'm saying that that's where you move into the more not stricter, but that's when you run into the Christian tradition, as opposed to other religions may have the same belief about God and that he developed the universe and all these other sorts of things.
Well, all of these religions, whether you go back into Judaism, Buddhism, Watchtower Society, all of them kind of have the same story. Okay,
some similarities. Yeah,
there's similar pieces to these stories, to this, to all of this. And I mean, I definitely don't, because I mean, when I was locked up, I read quite a bit of the Bible, because it's the only thing they give you when you first get into when you first go into intake into prison. You're isolated from everybody for about 21 to 30 days, and you have nothing to do, and the only thing that you can get to read is the Bible.
Yeah.
And so, and then I started reading it, and it's a good blueprint to live your life. You know what I mean?
It is. No doubt.
There's a lot of good stuff that's in it.
Mm-hmm.
But my thoughts on it are, religion is very old. You go back to the Knights of the Templar, way back, on the other side of the world. That's where it all pretty much started. Everything moved this way. There's been a lot of what are those things called? The new editions of the Testament. Things have changed. Things have been discovered that were manipulated, and we know what that is. So what my thought process is that religion was really used to keep people in line when nobody else was looking. You know what I mean? It was used.
I wouldn't disagree with that if you talk about religion, but if you're talking about, and I don't disagree with you on that point, because there is plenty of proof through the history of time. And by the way, in some ways, people have to take what I'm saying in terms of the I'm no theologian. I'm really not. I'm very insufficient when it comes to explaining a lot of particularly historical perspectives. I only can kind of share what I believe and what I know. But so when it comes to religion, there's plenty of history that suggests there that particularly the man, where man has taken any particular religion and then systemized it, and put it into a more corporate thing. But the premise of Jesus's life, in some ways, you could argue that Jesus came to fight religion in a lot of ways, because he was trying to say it ain't about the law. What he meant is the religious law. It ain't about that. He came down and made this really simple for everybody. He said, there's, here are the 2 commandments. Do you happen to know what they are?
Me?
Yeah.
What's he? Thou shalt not kill?
No. So we're talking. That's the Old Testament. That's the point. Now, of course, he didn't say that that's not important, but no. When Jesus came around, he said, "Hey, this is the bottom line," and I'm serious about this. This is the bottom line: love your neighbor as yourself. Love God with all your heart. And love your neighbor as yourself. He talked about love. You read into in particularly the New Testament, he didn't complicate things. You see, where Christianity, in my opinion, well, not my opinion, I know it's true, is different than the other religions. And maybe your listeners might be Muslim or Hindu or some other religions. I'm not casting any bad tones or thoughts about them. I'm just suggesting what I believe. The fact is that the difference is that Jesus, when he came here, he came and professed to be the Son of God. And there's where it gets, and that he died. He was crucified, died on the cross, and came back, suggesting that he was the Son of God, and that in essence, he was God in human form. So what happens there is that's the real bit, if you want to just get down to religions itself, with the various religions, that's the big distinguishing mark between Christianity and others. So there are people that say, and I've heard them say, and I'm not putting a bad spin or arguing with them, but I've heard many people say, well, I think Jesus was a good prophet, and he had some really good ideas, and he taught love, and he tried to take care of the poor, but that's it. I mean, I don't believe that he was God, that he was just a really good guy, a good person with good lessons. And my argument and I didn't come up with this argument, but my argument's always that, well, you can't be a Christian and not believe that he was the Son of God, because that is the distinguishing mark. That he said, I am essentially God. You see, it gets a little bit more complicated than that. And if that's not true, then he was a lunatic, right? I mean, imagine me showing up on your show here and saying, hey, Sean, I didn't tell you something, but I'm God. You'd be like, okay, listen, Kevin, my technology is about to break down. You see, I mean, right?
No, I would just say, all right, well, tell me about it.
No.
Explain how you're God.
Well, that's because you're a good podcaster, and you're going to be like, okay, let's roll with this, But the vast majority of us would be like, okay, that dude's a little cray.
I'm gonna be like, this is gonna be some good content.
This is gonna be some good content right here. But anyways, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I'm no theologist.
It's a mystery, man. It's a mystery for a lot of people. It's a mystery for me. There's a lot of stuff I don't know and I don't understand.
You know, the only thing that I do know at the end of the day is that there are things that have happened to me in my life that I can't explain, that I don't know what to attribute it to. And so I just throw it out there to the universe. Something out there was watching over me. I'm not putting any labels on it. And it's unexplainable, but I'm here. I've obviously been given many chances to right the ship, and I finally have, and I'm using that, my leadership. I'm using everything that I have to like make amends to this is my amends. You know what I mean? It's
not only your amends, but if I may, Sean, because I think what you're saying is so incredibly important, and I want to reflect this back to you. When one of my daughters, my oldest daughter, she when she was about a sophomore in high school, she got involved. Around here, there's a thing called Young Life. It is a Christian youth program. You have to be a sophomore in high school to get involved with it. And she was pretty excited to get into it, because a lot of kids, a lot of high schoolers, and while it is a Christian thing, they do a lot of fun things and hang out. It's just a lot of fun and just a lot of hanging out, just with obviously a Christian spiritual bent to it. But in any event, so she was really excited that when she was becoming a sophomore, and I remember I drove her to the house where they first started the Young Life meeting for that year, that season. I think they stopped during the summer or they start during the summer. I can't quite remember. But in any event, so I drove her there, dropped her off. She went in, and man, she was so geeked up. Really, she was. And so I left, came back about an hour and a half later. And when I pulled up, she was standing in the yard in front of this house. It's talking about like 100 kids were gathering, so this is a lot of fun and all this sort of thing. And they have youth leaders and all these kinds of stuff. So in any event, I picked her up and I parked. First of all, like maybe a half a block down, walked over to where she was. And I said, hey, how you doing? She said, okay. And so we started walking to the car. And as we got about halfway to the car, I was excited to find out how much fun she had. And I said, so how'd it go, sweetie? And she just broke down bawling. And I was like, what the heck? I was like, I was blown away. And so we get in the car and I said, wow, what's wrong? What the heck, And she, and I can't remember exact words, but she went on to explain that she went into this thing and nobody talked to her. Nobody paid attention to her. Nobody came over and befriended her. And as she said, she felt like she was there alone the entire time, didn't know anybody. Nobody kind of brought her into the fold. And she said maybe right at the end, one of the youth leaders came up and said something to her. And it just crushed her, whatever that was. It just wasn't. I think part of that was just her expectations, right? So we're driving home, and I pull into our driveway, and I was like, man, I don't even know what to say here, because that's a shame. That they should have said something to you, and I was kind of saying that to her, but then this thought popped into my head, and again, for me, I was like, I didn't hear God say, okay, Kevin, say this, but this thought popped into my head, and I thought this is the message right here, and I said, Christina, I want to say something to you, and I don't know, this is just my thoughts. And that is that, sometimes these things happen to us in life. And they turn into gifts. They turn into things that you then can take on and help other people. And you cannot understand what you felt tonight. No, you cannot help other people with the experience that you just had unless you actually experienced it. It's what we call empathy. It's your ability to actually go, wow, I know how that feels. And you can actually talk to other people. And I say the same thing to you, Sean. I really do. I mean this wholeheartedly, that that you, whether you caused it or not, you suffered a lot of pain, a lot of pain. You went through a lot of shit that you cannot talk to other people about. I can't talk to those people. I'm a coach. I've been doing this for 30 years. I cannot talk to the people in the way that you can talk to the people that are suffering in that way, or people that are maybe heading down that road, or talking to young people and helping them understand what you know. I don't care how great I am in my knowledge of personal development, of living a good life, or whatever you want to couch a spirituality, any of that stuff. I cannot do it. Only you can. Why? Because you paid the freaking price. Again, whether you caused it yourself or not, however you see it, that's fine. But the point is that you endured. You've got the scars and the stories that will speak into the hearts of people. And I know that you are using it in that way. It's an amazing thing.
No, thank you. I appreciate that.
It's how that works, brother. And you know that. I know you know it.
I'm trying to figure it out. It's just a matter of how do you package it in a way and get it out. A book obviously is the best way because the podcast has already started. The podcast has already been going for a year. The book would just tie in and bring it all together, and then other things can spawn off of that. Whether it's speaking engagements, coaching. I don't know if I'd want to be a coach or not, but I mean, speaking to me, that I like to speak. I was doing that when I was younger. When the first rehab that I went to was I was 16 years old. I had gotten in trouble. My mom gave me up as a ward of the court because I was incorrigible. She couldn't control me. I got in some more trouble, and I got sent to. I got a choice to either go to juvenile hall for 6 months or for 9 months, or go to a drug rehab for 6 months. And so I chose the drug rehab because it was co-ed. No brainer.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah, of course. Absolutely.
That's where my mind was. So, I went and I did this, and I was in between while I was in there, we would have to go do outreaches to high schools. And I would sit in front of a classroom and tell these kids my story and, how I got there and my words of wisdom for them.
Profound, man.
And, that's where I first got into doing stuff like that. And then, obviously life takes on, it took on a different thing for me. And, go fast forward, 15 years past that, because I think it was 16 or 14 years. And, and then here we are, 2010, I decided that I was going to change my life. And then, I haven't looked back since.
Man, that's amazing stuff.
Yeah.
Amazing stuff.
But the problem is it's just, there's so much in this space, so many different ways you can go and things that you have to do that if you don't know. And what's really starting to become apparent to me is that, I always thought that, getting a mentor was silly. You know what I mean? Like, why would I need a mentor?
Man. Yeah.
Like, why would I need a mentor? Why would I need somebody? But it's not really, I guess it is a coach. It's you're hiring that person to guide you through and show you what you need to know to be in whatever space that you're in.
That's exactly right.
And so it's not, I get it. I guess you could, it's a way to pay for it. The fast track of it, you know what I mean? Whereas where I gave my friend all that knowledge for free and here's some steps that you can skip and you don't have to go through those growing pains.
That's right.
This is the same thing, except somebody's charging money for it. And I get it. But I just, not everybody's, not everybody can afford that.
That's true. And sometimes though, I know as a coach, I try to be on a relative, sliding scale. I've coached like veterans, transitioning from the military, I don't charge them. Or people that just can't afford it. If somebody says, hey man, could I, get a few sessions from you trying to sort this out? I ain't got any money. Of course. Absolutely. I don't even have a problem with that,
Yeah. So. I was, that's part of it. But there was another one, like the technical part of all of this, You know what I mean? And there is a technical part, especially when you haven't been in it in the space where other people were at the beginning of this space. Yeah. And they've figured out how you tie in your email list to a website, to figuring out how to drive traffic and tying all of these things in that integrate and merge into your brand. You know what I mean?
Exactly right. Very, very well said. You know, it's the same. There's an old adage by entertainers that they would say. I heard this at least 30 years ago, probably. And I remember a person said, "There's show business is two words. There's the show, and then there's the business side, and it's exactly the same for coaching or speaking or anything else. That there's your skill as a coach or as a speaker, and then there's the business side of it that you just explained. And no question that business side is very, very challenging. I've met people that are very, very successful business-wise as coaches and speakers, but not really that skilled.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at people like, this is just my personal opinion, there's some entertainers out there that they're not really that good, especially if you see them live. But what they are very good at, they're good businessmen or businesswomen, that they've figured out the whole marketing machine. And then there's others. You come here to Nashville, it's the same case for LA or New York, anywhere else. Man, I can bring you down to some musicians and some entertainers that would blow your mind. But they're still B-listers because there's a lot more involved, as you well know, but maybe they haven't figured out the whole business component, the marketing and pulling all those things together that you talked about,
Yeah. All right, well, we are at 2 hours. Goes by fast.
That's what happens when you have a good conversation like I'm having with you, brother.
Yeah, well, I mean that's the whole thing.
It's good stuff, man.
Yeah, that's what I love about being a podcaster, or just having a show in general, with no structure.
Yeah,
it's,
as they say, organic. Just let it flow.
Yeah, and sometimes you get good ones, and sometimes you don't.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
more so you.
But
get
you're a good host, though, Sean. You listen a lot and.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. So go ahead and plug all your spaces, all your places, and things that you want my listeners to know about you.
Well, I appreciate that. No, I really appreciate it a lot. So The Gap Between Two Worlds, my book, you can go on Amazon and get it. And actually, on the Kindle version, I reduced it all the way down as far as Amazon will take it for the, during this whole pandemic. So I think it's like $2.95 for the Kindle version. So that's it. Yeah, The Gap Between Two Worlds. And my website is, my business website is actually Huma-dyne.com. That's HUMADYN.com. But the thing that I'd really like to put out there is McNultyLifeSkills.com. And that's this new program that I'm rolling out for teenagers. I'm really dedicated. It's called Get the Edge. It actually, believe it or not, well, no, it's not hard to believe. I was supposed to launch the program. It was a live program here in the Nashville area. It was a 6-week program teaching high school juniors and seniors various skills, life skills, to help them transition into college and work. But then the pandemic hits. And so like everybody else, like you and I were talking about, I said, okay, I'm going to keep moving here. I'm not just going to say, okay, it's gone, or I'm going to postpone it. So what I did is I moved it to now an online webinar, at least for now. And so, in fact, it's next Thursday is going to be my first webinar. It's all about what you and I are talking about. It's called Shape Your Future, or The Future Will Shape You. And again, it's a 1-hour webinar for high school juniors or seniors. And you can go to McNultyLifeSkills.com, and that's where you register. And that's very nice of you to allow me to make a little pitch here. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no worries. And this episode, when it comes out, and maybe it may be beneficial for me to get it out there. So in conjunction with whatever it is that you're doing, since it is talking about some of the same concepts and ideas, you might be able to drive some people to the to listen to this.
Would love to.
So what I'll end up doing is send me everything that you said. All right. If you want to just throw it in an email, your links, your bio, everything that you want people to know about you to go into the show notes, as well as a picture of yourself that you want me so I can put on the promo art and the headliner thing, audiogram that I'm going to build out for the promotion. And I'll send that back to you, and you can share that on all your channels if you like.
Outstanding, man. Happy to do it. And I appreciate the offer.
Yeah, no problem, man. Well, it was a pleasure talking to you. I know you got to go. So do I. I got another one lined up at 1 o'clock. So get a little chance to have a bathroom break and a water break and back.
There you go. Sean, it was a pleasure, man. I appreciate you, the privilege of coming on here and chatting with you and your audience.
All right. Well, I thank you, Kevin, and have a great weekend.
Thanks, brother. You too, my man.
All right. Bye.
Talk to you soon.
You've been listening to the Nowhere to Go But Up podcast. Sean is a single dad, a union blue-collar guy, and he spent time in federal and state prison for drug trafficking and fraud. When he was released from prison in 2006, all he had was the clothes on his back, a bag of mail, and some paperwork. Since then, he's turned his life around and shares the struggles and successes on this podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show, and we hope you were moved. To connect to the show, book a guest spot. For merch, Patreon, PayPal, and social media links, go to linktr.ee/nowhere to go but up. On Instagram at Nowhere to Go But Up Now. On Twitter at But Up Now. On the YouTube channel at Nowhere to Go But Up Podcast. See you next time.